you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. And I'm not Walter, or Lloyd, or Margaret, or Mitch, or Arianna. But before the program begins, we have a very brief announcement, an exciting announcement that I would like to make. My name is Melody Barnes, and I'm the chair of the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions and the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund. And just want to spend a few moments sharing some information with you. But I'm going to start out with the question for you. What if we told you that 7 million young men and young women had simply disappeared? That they are no longer in our nation's schools, that they are not in our workplaces, they'd simply disappeared. And what if I then told you that those young men and those young women touched by the juvenile justice system or slipping through our foster care system or had dropped out of our schools, not only had their futures impaired, but the cost of that to the nation was about $252 billion every year. Or over the lifetime of those young men and young women, $4.75 trillion to the nation over their lifetimes. When I was pleased and proud to serve as the domestic policy advisor to this president, we convened a council, the White House Council on Community Solutions, that looked at that issue, looked at that set of problems, and took on not only why these young men and young women were disconnected from work, disconnected from education, but why some communities were doing such an amazing job of reconnecting them to those institutions, and why these cross-sector collaboratives in communities were doing such an amazing job of taking on some of our nation's biggest challenges. That council consisted of 26 individuals, CEOs, nonprofit leaders, cultural and arts leaders, college presidents, philanthropists, and others. Some of them are in this room, Republicans and Democrats. Nancy Rubin was on that council, John Bridgeland was on that council. It was led by Patty Stonecipher. And they made recommendations to the president about a year ago. And last year I joined you, and I was pleased to announce that the Aspen Institute would be the home for the Aspen Forum and for the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund. That when called, Walter and Elliot answered that call and said that this could serve as a platform for our work. And what I'm going to announce to you today, we think is extremely exciting and to let you know what we've been doing for the past year. But before I do that, I'd like to ask Jamil Alexander to come forward just for about 2 minutes and tell you why this work is so important. Jamil is a graduate of the Crispus Attucks Youth Build Charter School. He's on the Opportunity Youth Leadership Council, and he is a fine example of why we're doing the work that we're doing. Jamil?
Thank you, Ms. Mel. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamil Alexander, once an Opportunity Youth. Now I'm a voice for them and a voice for national service. My early childhood years in Philadelphia, I was raised in a 20-person household, 3-bedroom row home, 2 floors, and a basement that was converted to 3 more rooms and a half bath where my sisters, cousins, and I stayed. I shared a room with my older cousin, a hip-hop graffiti artist, and my third roommate was the oil heater that heated the whole house. The car garage was transformed to a place of storage for food with a deep freezer. From the donations from the food bank, it's still like we never did have enough food. As each month grew to an end, I always anticipated the first of the month for our monthly field trip to the supermarket. As I went through childhood, going through a divorce, I was labeled as a problem child. I can recall the sessions with the social worker at the DHS in Philly during this era. I also remember my music teacher, back in middle school, now shut down due to funding. He would ask me, "Why are you so angry?" He would let me stay after school and literally beat the drums. From 6th grade to 8th grade, he helped me to learn and master and skillfully play and use each tom-tom, cymbal, hi-hat, snare, bass until I made it through the divorce and was featured at my 8th grade graduation. By the time I attended high school, sharing clothes was now just hand-me-downs. I got tired of it. Fighting had become a way of territorial expression, meaning that I was from West Philly, and I could hang with the best of them in North Philly because that's where my school was. I was introduced to the game. I was introduced to it as an avenue, a way to get money and provide for myself, not realizing the distraction and the destruction I would cause for my community. I failed the 9th grade, transferred to another school, got caught, mandated to do community service at a place that I knew nothing about in York City, and was introduced to a life-changing experience, Youth Build AmeriCorps, at Crispus Attucks. Youth Build AmeriCorps is an opportunity for young people to get a diploma, GED, while rebuilding low-income housing with leadership development component focused on service and civic engagement. And I am now the president of the National Alumni Council. So please excuse me if I get a little choked up here and there because the thug in me has died. If you see me gazing off, taking pictures, grabbing a video to freeze this moment in time right now or order, please don't judge me. Coming from a place where being a welfare recipient was a necessity of survival to being on the leadership council for the Aspen Forum for Community Solutions Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund, major service and opportunity givers. Even here at the Aspen Ideas Festival, the gathering of the great minds, I feel like I am on the mountaintop of service. It's becoming full circle in a way where I was a recipient and now I'm obligated to be a giver. I see the beauty of my struggles, the advancements, and how life has changed for me through service. But I acknowledge my surroundings. I see the other mountains, and I'm ready for the climb, and I'm gonna drink a lot of water.
And Jamil is also a newlywed, so. There are 7 million other young men and women like Jamil, and Youth Build provided a very intentional set of pathways for Jamil to become a successful member of our society. But we can do the same thing at scale for the other 7 million young men and young women, and we can do that intentionally. So that's why today I'm pleased to announce that the Opportunity Youth Incentive Fund is going to give up to $500,000 to 21 communities around the country, and we are proud to announce those countries today. Those communities today, and each of those countries. And each of those communities consists of collaboratives that I mentioned before, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the philanthropies, and others who are working together to create and build those pathways. And those communities are, and maybe you'll hear your own, Atlanta, Georgia, Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland, Boston, Massachusetts, Chicago, Illinois, I heard a little clapping for Chicago, Del Norte County, California, Denver, Colorado, Detroit, Michigan, Greenville, Mississippi, Hartford, Connecticut, Hopi, Arizona, Los Angeles, California, exactly, Southern rural Maine, New Orleans, Louisiana, New York, New York, Oakland, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, San Diego, California, San Jose, California, South King County, Washington, and Tucson, Arizona. And exactly, thank you. So in all, 21 communities, urban, rural, and tribal. So we're so proud of this work and our ability to go forward with those communities. I also want to acknowledge in the audience Steve Patrick, where are you, Steve, who's the executive director of this program, and would be happy to talk to any of you who are interested in the work that we're doing. And I also want to thank wholeheartedly not only our supporters, our funders, but also I want to thank Walter, and I want to thank Elliot and our entire Aspen family that has supported us over the course of the last year and allowed us to do this work. So thank you very much for allowing us to share this information with you today.
Melody, thank you. Melody, great work. Thank you. Thanks for all you do. There's no particular order, but sit next to me, Arianna.
So while the panel gets organized, I just wanted to introduce the discussion. I think it's going to be a fantastic dialogue, and what a remarkable philanthropic and community building program we just heard about. So we're at Ernst & Young really pleased to see that happening, and be thrilled to participate in that. I'm Joe Muscat. I'm a partner at Ernst & Young. I lead our strategic growth markets practice on the West Coast, and been a partner there for about 23 years. Working with entrepreneurs is in our DNA, whether it's helping them from their earliest stages of raising venture capital or private equity through transformative events like their initial public offering, but ultimately recognizing them and the work they're doing, what the work their teams are doing is a critically important part of sort of what we do at EY. We like to call ourselves the world's leader in advising, guiding, and recognizing entrepreneurs. Part of that is our Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year program. For 27 years, we've been celebrating entrepreneurship in that program. And it's these very businesses that we're going to be talking about on this panel, small businesses, innovation, team building, and so on, that make a success. Just to give you some data relative to this small business success, between 2009 and 2011, those celebrated as part of the EOY program grew revenues 50%, and maybe more importantly, they grew jobs 30%. That's in the teeth of the economic recession we've all lived through. But just to put a face on it a little bit, there's a brand I'm sure you're quite familiar with, Chobani yogurt, possibly. Chobani represents about 20% of the US yogurt market. It was founded by an immigrant from Eastern Turkey, Hamdi Ulukaya. He's our World Entrepreneur of the Year award winner. He bought a factory in upstate New York about 7 years ago. It was being shuttered by a multinational. He recognized an opportunity in the yogurt business to provide something that the US consumer really was unfamiliar with. Now he's producing over 3 million pounds of milk a day. And he has, as I mentioned, 20% of the US yogurt market. So that's the potential that small businesses have. So let me quickly introduce Walter Isaacson. He needs no introduction.
Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
Great.
Walter,
Good to
you.
see you. Thank you very much, and let's get down to it. Very happy to have the mayor of my city, New Orleans. Everybody knows Mitch. Become the 61st mayor and actually bonded with Lloyd. I think Goldman Sachs is now funding the city of New Orleans, which we appreciate. Margaret Spellings, besides not to make this a New Orleans evening, did save our school system after Katrina. She and I worked together. And not only did she save it, she helped us reinvent it. But Margaret also needs to be congratulated. She's just become the chair, CEO, president, whatever it is, of the George W. Bush Library Foundation and everything else. And we're going to look forward to working with you. Everybody knows Lloyd Blankfein, but truly Goldman Sachs, ever since, I remember writing a book called The Wise Men, which was about service to our country by the people of Wall Street, and Goldman Sachs has had that in its DNA ever since it's existed, and you certainly exemplify that. It's such an honor to have you with us, Lloyd. Arianna and I started together, believe it or not, 40 years ago as journalists in London. When she had just come down from Cambridge, I had come down from Oxford. She succeeded, I struggled and climbed the greasy pole. Now Arianna is reinventing journalism in 3 ways. First of all, digitally. Secondly, by reinventing the focus of journalism, so it's on some things that work. And thirdly, by reinventing television. And so it's always great after 40 years to still be sitting next to Arianna and learning from her. Thank you. Lloyd, let me start with you. Coming out of what Jamil said, you've just been given a major grant to the city of New Orleans for summer work, and then you're also, it's semi-related to your 10,000 small businesses. Why don't you explain all that to us?
We've had a program for about 2.5 years now where we've allocated $500 million to fund small business. And I'll just say, we're up and running. We started with 1 city and we've gotten up to 12 cities. We're going to keep expanding. And the idea is we're going to find in a particular community small business people, frankly, already proven business people. So we're not starting from scratch. We're taking proven business people who may have stalled out. These will be people who employ between 4 and 20 people, maybe 200,000 to $10 million of revenue. And the idea is to pour a lot of resources into those people, a mini MBA, if you will, literally a program, cohorts of 20 to 30 people. These people allocate their time, they work weekends, give up their weekends for months, engage in this program. We teach them courses in accounting, in negotiation, business planning, the math of business. We provide them with mentorship, and we provide them at the end of if it's warranted, seed capital as well. And then we measure the progress that goes. And we also create a business network because these people engage with each other. And as a result of our investment in the infrastructure of this program, we've funded a lot of programs at we do this through community schools, some community colleges. We leave behind an infrastructure, and now about 1,500 people have gone through this program in this country. We do it similarly in the UK as well. And we measure the output. And 2/3 of our people in this program, of our scholars, have added revenue in this environment, have increased their revenue, and more than half of them have added new employees. And we keep trying to tweak that business model, but the idea is to invest in small business, which again is the engine of job creation in this country, in fact, around the world.
You talk about it being the engine of job creation. It would seem to me that Goldman Sachs would normally look at big companies, big corporations. That's where your bread and butter. Why do you look at small businesses, and what drove you to this?
You know, again, whatever business you're in and whatever you do out there, whether it's for a living or your avocation, there's a certain ideal that drew you into the first place, and it's something that you also try to prove. This is what we do in our wholesale lives. Goldman Sachs is an institutional firm. We invest in businesses that turn out to be very, very big businesses. And we raise pools of capital at $20 billion at a clip sometimes. And we do it, and this is what gets done on a large scale, which, by the way, has a very good effect on small business because big business throws off a lot of opportunities for small business. But we have an ethic, and we want to prove our model, and the people in our firm who, as you know, and you said it yourself, and I appreciate it, have in their DNA service, they also like to serve on a human scale as well. And this is a very popular program in our company for people to contribute money as well as their time as mentorship. It is similar. It's a very similar thing, but to have people in Goldman Sachs who are a little bit remote from what they're producing sometimes because it's done on such a great scale, and have them after work stay on the phone for 3.5 hours to try to figure out whether it's worth an investment, whether a caterer should invest in a refrigerator, a new refrigerator,
Wow,
how long
how
will the
cool.
payback be, is rewarding for a lot of people in that process, but no one more than the person at Goldman Sachs.
You know, you talk about it being rewarding for you. I think you spoke at LaGuardia Community College. What did you gain from that?
Well, I'll tell you, I gave the commencement address at LaGuardia Community College, which was the first program that we did. And I looked out at a sea of people, and what I saw in front of me, and you know, again, this will sound a little hackneyed, but it's the way I felt. I saw out in front of me the reassurance that the American dream is still alive and well. Because when we invest this mini MBA and mentor, you give a little bit of confidence to people and a spark, and these people are hugely ambitious. And if you ever want to have an efficient way of restoring that in any doubt that you may have, come to one of these graduations where people, these scholars that we have, their employees show up, their parents show up, their grandparents show up, their children show up, and it shows what commitment and what strivers have done for this country and will continue to do. I think it's safe for another generation, I dare say.
I think I have a factoid about Margaret Spellings that may or may not be true, but don't correct me if I'm wrong. That you're the only U.S. Secretary of Education who actually worked at a community college.
I did.
Okay, good.
I
Tell us how that affected
Well,
you.
so Lloyd gave some of the metrics that we're so proud of, in addition to the fact that all these people end up doing business with each other. But one of the things that is a big legacy piece about this is what we're doing to develop community colleges to serve this unique population. These folks are, have been successful in their businesses. They're not startups. They're working their tails off. They're driving by their community college every day. And they don't think, hey, I ought to go in there and find out about the mini MBA that is a Babson best-in-class curriculum. So at the community level, we have built some excellence in community colleges and used this as a way to deploy this all-world curriculum. We've trained hundreds of community college faculty. We have engendered more quality in their own classes. and it is really spreading around the country. We also, and importantly, help community colleges by helping them establish better relationships in the community with the Chamber of Commerce, the Urban League, the Hispanic Chamber, you know, the NOLA folk, I mean, all the multiple economic developments, the city. And so it's much more than just the scholars, as compelling as that is. It is a legacy that is being left in these communities around the country that's long lasting.
Mayor Mitch, tell us what it's like on the ground when that happens.
Well, first of all, every time I have a chance to talk, the first thing I have to do is say thank you to everybody here for helping the city of New Orleans. It's your city. And to each of these individuals up here who have really done an unbelievable job, especially Walter. Now, Walter, you're too young to be called a grandfather, but you're the grandfather of New Orleans now.
I want
And
to
so
say
thank
that
you
I
for
covered his dad, and his dad's nickname for me was Boy Reporter.
Boy
So
Reporter.
I've now gone from
you're
Boy
now the
Reporter to
grandfather.
grandfather with two generations
But
of
I guess
Landrieu.
to frame this in the right way, you know, when all of us, when politicians run for office, they say, what are you going to do, right? And the first thing we always say is we're going to create jobs. Now, there's a big argument about whether government can create jobs or the private sector. I guess it's a combination of both. But one of the things that you get tired of as a mayor is people telling you what to do and nobody helping you figure out how to do it, right? So that's a common criticism that we get. But I knew because I was campaigning, I'd ask people, well, what do you need? You know, so in New Orleans, always small women, locally owned businesses would complain that they weren't able to participate, weren't able to create jobs, weren't able to participate in the big economy. And so you would ask them, hey, you know, what do you need? I mean, what do you really need with help? The first thing they always said was, we need better and more training. You know, we started our companies on our own. We're out here trying to figure out what to work. We didn't have a chance, you know, to get an MBA. We need more training. We need more capacity. We don't have enough stuff. I don't have enough machines. If I'm going to demolish houses, I need to, which means you need access to capital. So after I got elected, obviously, we did the traditional things that mayors do. You know, I called up Goldman Sachs and said, why don't you just move your corporate headquarters to New Orleans? And that way you can create 5,000 jobs. Sounds like a good deal. BP, maybe you can do that. And so you know that there's this huge competition amongst governors and mayors to recruit firms to come there, and that'll go on forever. And there'll be economic incentives to do that. And so that's called economic development. But there's another thing called economic growth. And small businesses are the engine of the nation's economy. And when this opportunity arose, right? And Goldman said, we're really interested in working with New Orleans on this. The second I looked at it, I said, I think that's really going to work because that satisfies the needs of what people said they wanted and they needed. And here's the beauty of the program. I mean, it's really spectacular. I can't say enough great things about it. The first thing that happened was try to figure out, well, who's going to come into the program? Because everybody wanted to be in. But the idea was, this isn't a gimme, right? You got to have some skin in the game. And so we don't want to talk to anybody that didn't try already to risk everything that they had. And so you have to have been in business for 2 years. So we're talking about, for example, there's a business called the Demolition Diva. She went into the business of destroying and taking down houses that needed to be taken down after, but she didn't really have everything she needed. There was another young man who has a karate class. There was another young guy that ran a barbershop. There was another guy that actually was in the construction business. And so we wanted there to be some transparency in who was chosen, and we didn't want the government to do it, so we needed a partner. So who did we ask? We asked the Urban League in New Orleans. You do the screening. So we got a bunch of people that came in. Out of 100 applicants, we chose 30, right? And then Margaret and her team came in, and they said, look, who's a community college? Well, Delgado, a community college in New Orleans, is the largest college in Louisiana. It's not LSU, right? And not everybody in the world, well, they're a little bit smaller, and they're fighting over who's bigger. But not everybody in the world's going to college right away. And the community colleges, right, are providing a service that every corporation in America says, who's going to provide the training for exactly what I need when I get out, and how are you going to train to the job that's available? So that we had that part. And then Margaret came in and said, look, I've got the curriculum. We're going to teach the teachers how to teach these businesses to do what they did. And then after it's over, Goldman Sachs said, not only are we going to provide all of that, but at the end of the day, we're going to be standing there. And now these credit risks are much better than they used to be, and they've been trained. We're going to give them access to capital. So this program gave them everything that they needed. Wow. Now, in New Orleans, and I don't know about the others, but I'm assuming they're just as good, we've been through 6 graduating classes now of 30. So 180 businesses have graduated. Almost every one of them has increased the sales in their businesses and added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. Now, what governor or mayor wouldn't pay a lot of money for a 500-job corporation to come in the city on any day? And these people are from New Orleans. They're born and bred there. They're going to stay there. That's where their families are, and they're building generational wealth. So young men like Jamil, right, all of a sudden have the opportunity they always needed to be. And that's why this program has been such a spectacular success. And New Orleans just feels, I mean, we're thrilled to have been a part of it. And I can just tell you, it's working here. And if it works in New Orleans, it pretty much, they can work anywhere.
Yeah, well, as long as we're giving shout outs, where's Dina? There's Dina Powell, was
Dina
at the
Powell, who
Delgado
runs the program.
graduation, I think, with Lloyd and the mayor. And Dina really did help put this together and has been a friend of the Institute and helped put this panel together. And so you deserve some credit as well. Thanks, Dina. So Arianna, you've done a lot on what's working, how to reinvent, and I think you've had some work with Goldman Sachs too. Explain that.
So basically, as you remember, I reached out to you first just before the conventions last year to say that those of us in the media are not doing enough to cover what is working. You know, there's a lot that is working around America, and it was demonstrated on this panel. And we are not putting enough of a spotlight on it. And by putting a spotlight, we can help scale it, because that's really what is missing. So at the conventions, at both conventions, we did the same program. We had panels moderated by Tom Brokaw. Walter was kind enough to be on both, talking about how can we recapture that job-raising spirit in America, where we can help small businesses in every way to get to scale, to get started. And at each of the conventions, we had over 100 startup entrepreneurs. We had an exhibition of them, and they were mentored, and they got to blog on the Huffington Post and get a lot of exposure. Then Dina Powell, I thought I was going to be the first to give her a shout out, reached out to me, and she had been running the 10,000 Women Entrepreneurs program at Goldman, which is absolutely fantastic, and said, what about if we launch a section together with Goldman Sachs that we call What is Working Small Business? And Lloyd and I actually launched it together in Davos. We co-authored an op-ed. That was quite something, right, Lloyd? That's right. And then what was really moving was shortly after we launched it, we had the first graduation at Goldman of the first small business graduates that Lloyd mentioned. It was so moving to be there at that ceremony. Valerie Jarrett spoke. Mika Brzezinski and I and Tory Burch had a panel there. And these women and men are absolutely amazing. And without that help, they would not have been able to scale these businesses and to learn what they learned. There was one woman there, Marlene Barnett, who has a carpet company in Brooklyn. And she's just absolutely awesome. In fact, I ordered a carpet from her immediately. If you come to my apartment, you'll see it. Just one for now. But she is like somebody who I think is going to be a household name. And that's the kind of potential if we just give a little help, whether it's financial help, mentoring help, or media help. And that's really where I feel the Huffington Post has a role to play, and everybody in the media has a role to play. You know, clearly we're going to continue covering what is dysfunctional, what is not working. But if we can put a spotlight on what is working, in many ways, another thing we did is raise money for nonprofits creating jobs. We did a competition, and there are so many new digital tools now. We got a fund from the Skoll Foundation, $250,000, and then partnered with CrowdRise and had a challenge who was going to win the competition to get the money from Skoll, but in the process, raise money from the community. We ended up raising an extra $1.3 million from our readers, and most of these donations were in under $100. So there is a real longing for people to help. I mean, there are some moving moments when people would send $20 and say, you know, I'm out of work, that's all I can afford, but I want to help you create jobs. And that's something which the media can do because we have millions of readers, and we can engage them and tap into their own longing to be part of the solution.
Well, to give a shout out to my old friend Ben Franklin, you know, when he formed his newspaper in Philadelphia, it was simply to become part of what he called we the middling people, the shopkeepers, artisans, and small businesses of Philadelphia. They called it the Leather Apron Club because all the other parts of the media were, you know, helping the proprietors or the Quakers or whatever. And he said if we can have a Market Street, which is what it became of small businesses, it will help bring the diverse segments of our community together. I was wondering
You
if
didn't
it,
cover him as a young reporter, did you?
no. He was right before I. Yes, right. But it does seem to bring together the diversity too.
Well,
Sorry, Mitch.
I would make 2 points about that. For example, we were successful in recruiting GE to put some very important, high-tech, high-paying jobs in the city. But the folks that are going to get those jobs are the PhDs and the master's degrees that are coming out of UNO, Xavier, et cetera. And those are great jobs to have, and we'll take them every day. But as you said just now, this, and Arianna alluded to this, when you go to these graduations, you're talking to the tailor, you're talking to the carpenter, you're talking to the contractor, you're talking to the folks that are real salt of the earth that have actually been out there doing the hard work. And I think that sometimes when you drive down, if you're driving down the street, you ought to stop and get out of your car and walk a couple of blocks. And it looks a little different because you're driving by all of these folks that are providing most of the jobs in America. It's those individual mom and pop operations that really kind of seed the nation together in a really important way, but they need help too. And most of our economic development efforts on behalf of governors and mayors has been on the big stuff. This is about really needing America together, you know, and it's working very, very well. And the reason why you get overwhelmed when you go to these graduations is because it becomes obvious and manifest to you that you've been walking by it every day. And we've now figured out, if you think about what Arianna said about the method, this is a public-private, not-for-profit educational partnership where everybody's in the game, and what's coming out of it is just beautiful for everybody. And that's why it's so special. And it's working really, really well. And it can be scaled pretty much across the country, I think.
Margaret?
You know, Walter, when we looked at this with Lloyd's guidance, we didn't find anything like this in the marketplace. There were plenty of things for large companies, and there were, you know, if you want to file a permit to get registered with the Department of Agriculture, those very much startup things, but we didn't find anything that was just like this. And what we've done with this program that is a 4 or 5 month, 100-hour, weekend, practical, applied, you know, learned Friday and Saturday, applied Monday and Tuesday. This is something that is, I hope, a more coming thing to American higher education, which is we're going to meet our customer where they are and with what they need. And so we are building something unique through these private public partnerships, but it's also a different thing that we've never had before.
And it ties education more directly to the skills needed in the workplace, which
Absolutely.
was one of your things.
And confidence. First of all, you know, the commitment and confidence. 99% of the people who join this program finish it. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. Wow.
So in other words, these are people with families. Now, I want to say, I don't want you to get the wrong impression when you say Taylor and the people who are starting this program, some of them have been in that business for 3 generations. So the minimum requires a couple of years. Some have been in there for 3 generations, but it's been stagnant in a way. Some of them come into us with $3 million in sales and they want to make it $9 million. So it's small business. It's not, you know, it's leverage. I just spoke to somebody, one of our scholars who's up to 81 employees and $9 million of revenue.
Cheers.
Who's that? Stand up.
She's from Los Angeles.
Right.
So at the present, from our Los Angeles program and our present rate of growth, measured against our rate of growth, you know, with our slightly lower trajectory, she'll acquire Goldman Sachs in 2022. But yeah. So the other thing I want to say is, you know, we have this notion of a tipping point where a little push on a well-balanced fulcrum can set things. We've allocated a lot of money to this, but a lot of the money also is for lending, which we get back. It's not, when I think of how much money pours into this stuff, and I think of the capacity that we're just using that's pre-existing, community colleges, Arianna's network and distribution and the megaphone that she carries, and also, frankly, her commitment to progress and recognizing progress, and great mayors, and it doesn't take that much. And one of the things why we did it city by city is because we learn something and we get better at it, and you get more leverage, and I really do think it's scalable. When I think of the billions of dollars that pour into futile programs, and what's really being levered here is the character of people in this country. Because you go in, and it sounds, I want to make it clear, it sounds could come across as patronizing when we say the people are really good, and somebody may finish that sentence, which I don't intend, for people who are doing this. I am telling you, they are good for people we recruit into Goldman Sachs. They just didn't necessarily get an opportunity. High percentage are immigrants, didn't get undereducated, and didn't get a chance to lever it up, but exposed to an opportunity, it's quite formidable.
I want to ask you and Arianna something, which is, I mean, you do not only this, but 10,000 women throughout the Middle East and the Muslim world. And it's a sense of corporate social responsibility that goes probably way back in Goldman's history. I remember first seeing it when I was learning from John Whitehead and writing the book that involved
another New Orleans.
Yes, right. So tell me about why you see that as part of corporate social responsibility, or is it just part of your general corporate ethos? And I know Mariana has done work on the third metric and other things as well.
Look, I think everybody who works in a company, our company, but I think companies like ours, people have a lot of choice. You know, the people who we want have a lot of choices of where to go. And people want to feel good about themselves beyond what it takes to make a living. You want to feel proud of what you do. You want to feel that you're accomplishing something. You want to feel the leverage of community. And frankly, if people make money and enough money, those intangible things really start to outweigh, and that accelerates towards the end of your career or in the middle towards the end, because you've already met your subsistence needs, and now you really have to start to think what you want to accomplish. And if we want to retain our people, we had to provide a platform for them to do that better than they can do it by themselves. And part of my pitch in the recruiting process, by the way, and more in the retention process, look, you can leave this and go your philanthropy route. We're certainly not going to fight that. But let me tell you the leverage you can get by applying that through the platform that we could provide in this organization of money, convening power, prestige. Look at the partners that come together and do this stuff. And you know, you could be at that end of a very, very long and effective lever if you stay. When we get people to stay. But then they don't stay forever, and they're not supposed to. They go on and do funny things like become Secretary of Treasury or this or that. So
Chairman of the Aspen Institute.
Chairman of the Aspen Institute. So every once in a while, we let go.
Arianna?
Well, that's related to what we've been working on that we are calling the third metric. And it's really an editorial project to redefine success. You know, success is commonly defined as money and power. But increasingly, as Lloyd pointed out, that's not enough. It's almost like a two-legged stool, and you fall over if that's all that you measure your life by. So part of the third metric, which consists very quickly of four things: a sense of well-being, how do you tap into your own wisdom to make good decisions, a sense of wonder. You know, here we are. Very often, if you are completely blinkered about where you are going in your career, you can miss it. And finally, service and giving back. This is absolutely essential. And what you said about retention is really key. I mean, I saw at the graduation ceremony, there were a lot of executives from Goldman Sachs who are mentors to the small business people. And they were really glowing. You would have thought their own kids were graduating. Now, that's not something you can buy. It's something you have to experience. You have to be willing to put this 3.5 hours at the end of your working day to consider whether they should buy the refrigerator or not. But the reward is absolutely amazing and intangible. And when we begin to measure our success, including that, we make different decisions, and our lives end up being infinitely more fulfilling and adding value in a way that we never imagined.
It made me just think about a couple of things. First of all, in America, we don't really use birthright as something that we talk about because it's not really part of our history. But I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration to say if you're an American, you kind of have a right to expect a good opportunity. And even though this is obviously the greatest country in the world, we're leaving a lot of people behind, as Melanie talked about a little bit earlier. And Lloyd kind of testified for all of you, and Dina and everybody knows this. When you go here and you see these people, every one of them is unbelievably talented and has the capacity and the capability to do great things. And the beauty of what's going on here, as Lloyd said, is we didn't create anything new. We kind of took what was already there, met each other, and kind of used what we had to create something. that just hadn't been created before, and now it's producing a tangible, real, wonderful result. And I just think there's a huge amount of untapped potential in this country if we can all figure out how to create the opportunity and the environment that will grow it, will explode, and really help the country in a very significant way.
Well, that's actually a point that Warren Buffett, who chairs the advisory board for the Goldman Small Business Initiative, he said something which is very true, and I think those of us in the media need to really pay attention to, which is that so much of what we write about, so much of our national conversation is around our deficits. It's around, our fiscal deficit, around unemployment, around all the things that are the crisis we're dealing with. We're not spending enough time focusing on our surpluses. And there is a real surplus of creativity, ingenuity, compassion that's manifested when we come together for these initiatives, whether it's the Goldman Sachs initiative or what's happened in New Orleans or what you are doing with community colleges. And I really profoundly believe that if we spend more time discussing this, we are going to be able to scale them. We're going to inspire other people to get involved. We are going to help those who are already involved accelerate what they are doing, and it's going to dramatically change the country we're living in.
That's why Melody, I think, calls it Opportunity Youth. Let me open it up, see if there are any questions or thoughts. Just stand up, shout out, run for a microphone, do whatever you want. Questions, comments? Yes. Here, the microphone is to your left.
Thank you. Oh, you're going to hold it. Sandy Israel, local gal. In all of what you're talking about, are they what we used to call blue-collar jobs, training electricians, training plumbers, training all of the mechanics? What is your thought about vocational training?
Go ahead, Margaret.
Well, obviously we need more of that and have it be more relevant and more market connected. Our high schools have drifted away from some of that, and we need to rebuild that. And people look to community colleges for that kind of programming often. What this is something very unique and different, serving a population that, frankly, as I said, has gone wanting. These are not people that see themselves dropping out of life and going to a four-year university full-time, and they're working their tails off, and they don't have time to go to school. And so we have to. One of the trickiest things about this program is to go find these folks, find these people who are busting their chops every day. They are in every line of work, as Mitch said. They are technology people, restaurants, construction, very high-skilled things. In Houston, my hometown, there's an ecosystem around, obviously, the petrochemical industry, and there are people in healthcare. And you have these very, very sophisticated businesses, some of which are quite large, as Lloyd said, in the millions. But it's across the board. And what is so gratifying about this is these business owners have so much in common, too. They work together in this peer mentoring way that becomes so powerful to them. The faculty almost gets out of the way because they help each other solve their problems. They talk about things that they've done. But this is not not that kind of a profile. It is somebody who is at a level of sophistication. Yeah.
Now, Margaret, let me follow up on that by putting you on the spot on a somewhat political thing. You pushed, and I think it really helped this country, the concept of No Child Left Behind. Then it sort of gathered a little bit of controversy around it. Are you still passionate about making sure we assess and make sure that no kid and are you worried that we're moving away from that?
Walter,
both parties.
Thank you for that medium speed pitch over the plate. I love you for that, of course.
But either are you going to get mad or what?
No. And we have drifted from that. Now local control is suddenly very, very fashionable again, which means that everybody's going to do their own thing, and we are going to have less power around annual measurement, data, and accountability to get kids to a particular place. And the particular place was reading and ciphering on grade level. And we are not going to have kids college and work ready if we do not start with that first. And as we cranked up the heat on some of this stuff, obviously a lot of the vested stakeholders started to howl. You saw some of this in your town. And I think we've got to get serious about it. When half of our minority kids in this country are getting out of high school on time, we ought to be have an urgent crisis. We ought to be mad and upset about the fact that we're not doing the job.
Can I say what also plays into this, and it applies to both? the importance of metrics and the will to apply metrics. I mean, you could say, be on a panel and be so aspirational and inspiring and get something and accomplish nothing, and pour out a lot of dough and accomplish nothing. I mean, there's almost no correlation between intentions and effectiveness. But if you are ruthlessly engaged in trying to improve the world and you're really kind of disciplined about it, you want to make sure you see a return on this. And I think No Child Left Behind required these metrics. And I'm telling you, the people who are in the business of providing the services and have done it institutionally for a long time, they're not dying to be measured. I'm dying to measure them because I want to see whether we should cut this off and overfund something else, move funding over to something and do with what works. That's what business people would do. That's what, frankly, that's what Darwin would do. That's what natural selection and processes would do. And by the way, and I don't think it turns something that's so well intended to sound so sharp, but we do that in this program. If we weren't creating jobs, if people weren't going out and hiring people, if it wasn't effective, we'd go back to the drawing board. We wouldn't spend our money on that.
That's right. Amen.
First of all, I agree with that. When I ascended to the job that I have, or descended, however you would view that, the city didn't measure anything, and we couldn't know whether anything was effective. So now we measure everything. I will say this: there's a way to measure incorrectly too, but that doesn't mean you should throw out the process of measuring. And so I think in some instances, in No Child Left Behind, the controversy was over the way we measure, and a lot of teachers on the ground said, look, we're teaching to the test now. We're not teaching the kids the other things that we need, so let's quit measuring altogether. Well, the better idea is let's just measure better and teach better to the thing that we need. But I don't know how you run anything if you don't measure it. It's kind of irresponsible in a way, because you have no idea whether you're investing the limited amount of resources that you have in anything that returns a value. And the value could be for the private sector, return on investment in money, or for the public sector, it could be the good of the community as a whole. And there is a way, because in my life as the mayor of the city, we have balanced budget requirements. We have to meet them every year, and it is a zero-sum game. What you have coming in, you can spend, but you can't spend more than you have. And that means that I have to decide, along with the city council and the democratic process, whether we're going to spend $1 on a recreation program or a police officer, on the blight reduction strategy, or whether it's not, we're going to cut the grass. And there's not a lot of money to go around, so you have to figure it out, which is why this particular program is so helpful to us, because it leverages the little bit that we have and gets us a lot, because I got other folks helping. And it's in their best interest to help financially. It is true that it's part of their ethos as a company, but at the end of the day, they're creating better credit risks. And people are borrowing money from them and they're paying them back. That's pretty good. That's the business you're in, right? And that works. And it's good for us too. And so this is just a good model for us.
One of the problems with how the No Child Left Behind Act was implemented was that, let's say you identified children that were not learning, then the funding wasn't there to really improve their chances or to give them the kind of homeschooling, I don't mean literally homeschooling, but additional schooling help. There was a minimal amount of money left. And then if the school failed, there was nowhere else for the kid to go. So there was really a systemic problem where you had these failing schools, and then we identified the problem, but we didn't really have any real solutions. And that's why the model of what happened in New Orleans is so key, because we need something very disruptive to fix education. We can't just measure the failure, because we all know we're failing. And if we don't have solutions to deal with the failure, we are not really adequately solving the problem. And I think what happened with New Orleans, what happened with bringing in the Teach for America team, what happened with what you did, made such a difference and created a model that can really be used in other cities.
Margaret?
And we know so because we have all kinds of amazing assessment data and progress improvement in New Orleans. Yes, we have imperfect measurement systems, but we can evidence their success because we've disrupted, we've measured, and it's working. And I'm the first to give all the credit in the world to what you all have done down there.
Thank you very much. Well, Walter was a big help in some of the people.
Part of it was we did make sure people had choices. If a school was failing, you could move to another school.
Exactly.
And frankly, most people in this room, they had choice where they sent their kids. We shouldn't deny that to everybody in this country.
Absolutely.
Yes, way back there, first hand I saw, sorry. I hope I'm being fair here. And identify yourself if you don't mind. Otherwise, the NSA will tell us who you are.
Okay, hi. Tammy Bellinfanti, Associate Professor of Law at New York Law School. And my question is, do you think it's time for corporations, writ large, because some of them are beginning to do this, so do you think it's time for corporations to begin to articulate a new normative framework for how you define success?
For corporations?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But it's an important question, which is, does a corporation have only one duty, which is a fiduciary duty to its shareholders, or does it have a broader set of longer range duties that will eventually pay off for the shareholders, but will make a Goldman Sachs a Goldman Sachs?
Listen, yes to both. They're not opposite sides of the same coin. Our duty is to our shareholders to create an institution that generates value for the ages, which gets discounted to present value and is reflected in the share price. What percentage of the value of our firm is our brand and reputation and the clients we have and the people who want to call us and use us and think highly of us and the service we provide, and the history of the firm through thick and thin? Well, let me tell you, a lot of that is what and you pointed this out, is what my predecessors done when Sidney Weinberg ran the War Board and Gus Levy created some of the most important hospitals in New York and maintained it. And that loyalty I'm the beneficiary of today, and it's reflected in the current value of our company, and that's what we're doing. We also have to recruit people, and they have to feel good about themselves. I mentioned that. But that is how we, companies don't want to trade at their book value. They want to trade at multiples of that book value. What is the part of the book value that's beyond the equity or the value of your firm on dissolution? That's all this stuff. And so it's very important to the long-term self-interest of the firm, of course, goes to the broader interest of the community. And tell you another thing, everything we do as a firm, whether we're advising companies who want to expand, whether we're financing that expansion or managing risky assets in the market, the success that we have in attracting those opportunities all correlate with growth. So anything we do that funds growth doesn't just go to inure to the greater penumbra of our benefits. It's a benefit that we receive immediately.
But there's definitely a contradiction between pursuing just short-term growth to be reflected in the share price, quarterly earnings, and long-term growth that benefits, shareholders, stakeholders, employees, and everything. And that's really the debate going on now. How can you serve all those interests if companies that are less successful than Goldman Sachs have the constant pressure of quarterly earnings? And we see the gyrations that companies get into to meet and exceed quarterly earning expectations.
I think if you have a good, solid history and a good, solid DNA, you know how to navigate those straits. Sure. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm Emma Green with The Atlantic. So just to follow up on that question, I'm interested in the connection between the subject of this panel, which is small business, as Mayor Landrieu said, the salt of the earth contractors and tailors. So what's the connection between the corporate values, the stakeholders, the shareholders, that profit motive, and sort of helping these salt of the earth people that you all have been talking about?
I'd say, again, there's a lot of different elements in creating and maintaining a franchise. We have to have clients, we have to have happy shareholders, and we have to, the feedstock from our business, if you're an energy or refining company, your feedstock is oil, and you turn it into gas. Our feedstock in our service business is people, making sure we can recruit, go to the schools, and people want to work at Goldman Sachs, and once there, they're satisfied not just from what they make in income, but their psychic satisfaction because they're contributing to their communities. So that's a big part of how that ties in. And I said something in passing before that I hope resonates. Every once in a while, people who finance governments and the biggest companies in the world, the biggest institutions, like to do things on a human scale.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Margaret.
I want to add one quick thing. The people that we work with in this program, like the woman from Los Angeles, every single one of them thinks they can be Lloyd Blankfein, they can be Warren Buffett, they're going to do business with Goldman Sachs. This is not a charity program.
They don't wanna be small
These people have, they're competitive, they're entrepreneurial, they have egos, they have drive, every single one of them. And, right?
Right. She was pulling on her hair. She didn't want to go all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to answer that from two perspectives. The perspective of the individuals that are being helped and then Goldman Sachs. Lloyd didn't give you the whole portfolio of Goldman Sachs in New Orleans, so I'll give it to you very briefly. And a piece of it's philanthropic, a piece of it is innovation, and a piece of it is just regular business. Right? So yesterday, Lloyd announced that Goldman Sachs was giving the city of New Orleans $450,000 to help pay for the summer jobs program. So we're going to be able to put 1,600 teenagers to work this summer. And so, Lloyd, thank you very much for that. That would fall into the philanthropic pot. And then, of course, the 10,000 small businesses is let's try something innovative that works, that is not, as Lloyd said, a gift. This is about teaching people, giving them opportunity, lending them money, and making sure they're paying back for their skin in the game. And then there's the traditional relationship that companies like Goldman Sachs have with the city of New Orleans. So you know we're rebuilding the whole city. Goldman Sachs has helped finance $166 million worth of infrastructure building. Now here, a way to get things done. So President Clinton and Rahm Emanuel and a bunch of people are saying this has got to happen on the local level because it's not happening on the national level, and that cities have to start working with the private sector to build infrastructure in America. So this is where these individuals can work. So whether it's building the schools, rebuilding the new housing developments that we have, or rebuilding healthcare, which is important. Goldman Sachs, through new market tax credits, has provided that kind of funding. And as Arianna and I have talked about before, creating another model between local governments and the private sector to build infrastructure in the company. Now, the one unifying factor is that all of those things are job creators for people that live in New Orleans that can become, stand on their own 2 feet and build a community that then eventually will become customers of Goldman Sachs, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a virtuous cycle that's being created through their approach through philanthropy, innovation, and then typical relationships that we have. On the side of the individuals themselves, what they are doing, these individuals that they're investing is they are the ones who are hiring people, and all of the people that they hire are people that have been citizens of New Orleans forever. Right. So that's helping the economy grow, which is one of the reasons why the economy in New Orleans is actually performing better on a whole point scale than the national average right now. And it's a model that is working, that, as Arianna has, it can be reflected in the work that can be done in other cities in America.
Great. So, yeah, sorry, I've been ignoring you before. Let's make this the last question. So make it brilliant and broad, and pressure is on you. Yeah.
I'm actually going to make a shameless plea. Yeah. As a small business owner myself who employs 28 people in Washington,
Well, identify yourself too.
Rebecca Linder. And my question is, how are you going to accelerate this program to get more access to people like me?
In other words, please let you in.
Exactly right. A
Thank
shameless plea, as
All
I
right.
said.
Have you applied? Have you applied?
I am just learning about it now.
Well,
I will apply.
How do we bring
Absolutely.
things to scale?
Aspen wasn't one of the first needy places that we were thinking of when we were designing this model. I think look, we have, again, talking about convening power, and everybody here has it, and we work together on this committee. And when you can have Warren Buffett as chairing your advisory group, et cetera, we wanted to demonstrate something. This is eminently scalable. When I think of what goes into small business investing in this country and what comes out of it versus this. So this is our little effort to do a very big reconnaissance in force. We're up to 12 cities, and you know something? It's scalable. Goldman Sachs, or any one company is not going to carry this by itself. This is going to have to be scaled up, and others are going to contribute. And who knows, the government may get interested in it, although who knows whether we lose our flexibility and whether some of the innovation gets lost in it. And I tell you, the last ingredient, which is very important, which you see demonstrated here, we've gone to cities, and you have to have people to work with. There has to be a good infrastructure of a community college. By the way, we don't just write checks to people. When we give people access, we work with community development financial institutions who are good and in place, and we fund them, and they distribute the money in a sensible way. And above all else, you need somebody at the top of that pyramid who's like Mayor Mitch, who does it. And we have gone to other cities that would be higher on your list of places where you would do it. and we haven't been able to connect yet because we're not trying to knock our heads against the wall. If we have a choice between going to a needy place where we're not going to get anything done and going to a place that's helpful, that we could scale and make a contribution, we measure the effect we have. So we'd rather go to places where that effect will be leveraged. And so a little bit the political infrastructure matters too.
Do you want to name names?
Let me just say,
they know who they are.
my last shout out to Benjamin Franklin, his first Poor Richard's Almanac. The slogan was doing well by doing good. Everybody on this panel has done well by doing good. Thank you all.
Thanks for the extra time. You know, I know we cut into that. It was great. It did Jamil.
Yeah, Jamil did great. No.